June 6th, tonight we'll be reviewing the special revenue funds, which include inspection, parking, airport, conservation property, golf arena, and solid waste. Also includes a review of the enterprise funds, which are water and wastewater. So with that, do we have anybody have anything before we start? Okay, see none. Mr. Manager.
Just a quick question, Your Honor. Would you like me to do the budget pieces, the pro forma, and then have the public hearing after each one? Or do you want the budget pieces, answer questions to the council, pro forma, questions from the council, and public hearing?
So, in looking at the audience,
Yep.
there's not a lot of members of the public.
So just,
here.
just stop me when you want.
I think we can, which one do you want to testify on? Okay, so it doesn't look like we have a lot of public members.
Okay.
So why don't you just keep on going and we'll do the
Until you-
public hearing at the end.
So you just give you the, okay.
All right?
Yep. Okay. So you'll want to be on item number 4 for the June 6th agenda. That is titled the Inspection Fund. And you want to be on page 134. So this one, start off with a good one. The budget for this fund has been merged with the general fund, which I went over the last meeting on June 2nd. The projection for this fund is that the expenses will exceed revenues by $119,000. General fund has been provided support for this fund for the past several years. Under the new permit structure, the administrative costs associated with billing of inspections is based on time spent, and that will be greatly diminished and be replaced with permit sales. And I'd be glad to go over any questions. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. Permit sales, be glad to go over any questions before I move on to the other funds. But as you can see, in 2023, the budget you'll be voting on, it's all been eliminated. So it's all, that's why it's all zeros.
Anybody have questions? Okay, see none. We'll move on to parking fund.
So you want to be in item number 5, parking fund. Parking fund has improved revenues from fiscal year 22, including a $438,000 boost from the ARPA funding, which you've already approved. Although parking penalties are trending $60,000 short of budget for fiscal year 22 projected, metered parking is trending ahead of budget by $252,000. Metered parking cards are up by $49,000 and rental income by $27,000. Overall, fiscal year 22 revenues are projected to be ahead of budget by $712,000. This makes Councilor Fennessy very happy. Fiscal year 22 expenses projected to budget are down $155,000. This produces a projected surplus in this fund of $658,000. For fiscal year 23, revenues are budgeted to increase by $815,000, or 30.5%. This includes the second installment of the ARPA funds in the amount of $438,000. Fiscal year 23 expenses are budgeted to increase by $205,000, or 7.1%. This will produce a budgeted surplus of $400,000. In this budget, I'm proposing a number of expensive revenue changes, which are broken down in the PCR section, program change request section of the appendices on page 591 and page 592. You don't need to go there. The major items are increase in revenues for permits, metered parking penalties, parking card revenues, restaurant dining on street spaces, and non-metered parking penalties from the general fund in the amount of $168,000. Revenue reduction from the Fayette Street lot and Store Street garage due to repairs, $18,000. Increase in staffing for the addition of 2 parking enforcement officers and equipment technicians, $78,000. Increase in transfer to general fund due to the move of non-metered parking penalties, $60,000. Fees associated with with meter conversions and web-based permit parking module, $46,000. Batteries for smart meters in the kiosks and equipment for the PEO technicians, $12,000. Increase in maintenance to the pre-COVID levels for the garage is $60,000. And taxes associated with the supplemental rent at the Store Street garage, $6,000. Although the parking fund was greatly impacted by the pandemic, fiscal year '23 returns to the pre-pandemic levels and improvements to the operations. So if you go to the pro forma, so go out of that tab, go back to the parking budget for the pro forma. Under the first column, you'll see the revised fiscal, and I'll go do this slowly because this is new to some of you. The first column is the revised fiscal year '22 budget for revenue and expenses and a budgeted 2010 $1,000 loss. Does everybody see where we are? They're $209,649. Loss was what was projected in last year's budget. The beginning working capital is $271,000, so this would be reduced to a fund balance of $62,000. That's where we were when we approved the budget last year. The second column is the fiscal year '22 estimate. The same projected net line shows an estimated gain of $658,000 or $867,000 better than budget. $438,000 of that is the gain from the ARPA funds, which you've already approved. The next column is the fiscal year '23 budget. We are budgeting a gain of $400,000, which would increase the ending fund balance to $1.3 million. $438,000 of the fiscal year '23 gain is also due to the ARPA funding as the second installment. If you go to the fiscal year '24 column, there's a parking rate increase projected in fiscal year '24, and then also one projected in '28. Those you don't take any action on tonight. Those would be something you look at when the budget comes up again next year. But just looking at the finances, that's what we see. You'll notice that, see major capital expenses also in fiscal years '23, '24, '26, and '27. Along with those capital expenses are the debt services to support those needed projects, as you see in that debt service line, about 2/3 of the way down. Factoring in stronger fund balance position this year and next, the projected rate increase for fiscal year '24 and '28, and significant capital expenses and associated debt service costs, the ending working capital in fiscal year '28, which is the last column you see on your right, is $665,000, or $237,000 ahead of the 10% fund balance goal. And we use the same thought process in all the funds and pro forma. So essentially what you're trying to do is you're looking at that last column, trying to come somewhere close to the working capital fund balance and the fund balance policy, which is Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee has recommended to City Council, and City Council accepted. That's what drives the rate increases and the changes going forward. So even though you see ups and downs over the years, what you're striving for is some sort of equanimity here in getting out to that last year. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? We'll just go right around. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. So, in looking at the pro forma, if I'm understanding this correctly, we're going to be ahead this year primarily based on that $438,358 that we're getting from ARPA.
Correct.
Okay. And then in fiscal year '24, based on the projection, we'll only see the parking fund in the black if we increase rates as projected, because we won't have that one-time money anymore.
That's correct. Okay. And it really depends. As you know, we budget conservatively with revenues. So when we get to that point, you could be in a completely different situation. You take a look at that and say, hey, we're doing well financially. We don't need to do that rate increase. Or you're going to look at it and say, boy, it really hasn't picked up as much as we thought it would, and we're going to need that rate increase.
Follow up. And if I'm reading the pro forma correctly, it's anticipating that we're going to have significant bond costs associated with a project in fiscal year '24. Is that the State Street Garage?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, Councilor.
Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, I received a call with regards to the 2 parking positions
Yes.
that we're adding this year. And I understood from your presentation earlier that these are positions that we held off on during COVID.
Right.
The question was, are we bringing these people back, or adding these people into the parking division because we are having a difficult time getting to all the meters in order to issue fines, et cetera? That we've expanded the meters in the meter area in the city, and now we need to add staffing in order to cover all of that. Is that true? How is that being interpreted?
No, and Mr. Walsh can come forward when I get this wrong. The idea is that the city council in their master plan of 2017, I believe it was, really wanted to, because of all the demands that occur after hours, when the poets, so to speak, are in position, weekends, and also doing issues with snow removal and whatnot in the downtown, that the idea was we need to have staff available for those times and to be able to go out into the neighborhoods. So right now, you can imagine that most of the existing parking effort is done in the metered spaces and the time spaces in the downtown. But as you go from here, just say where we are physically, all the way up the hill towards the high school, we get a lot of calls from those areas. We get a lot of calls from Christian Avenue. We get a lot of calls from Petticock, all around the city, where people want some sort of enforcement because people park too close to driveways. And what we've found is the police department is so busy dealing with the issues that they're dealing with that becomes one of the lowest priority items. So the idea here is, do you fund these positions? Now, there's a revenue source associated with this. So I know there's a cost of, I can try to remember what the cost was associated. But if you end up saying, okay, we're going to not add those positions, well, you also need to remember to remove the revenue pieces associated with that. So that if I remember correctly, the net on it between adding the positions and the costs associated with that and the revenues that are then go along with it really saves the parking fund about $30,000. That's really what we're talking about spending, is an additional $30,000 in parking funds, not a general fund. So if you were to remove those items, or somebody was to remove those items, you would not impact in any way the tax rate.
This, follow-up, Your Honor. The second request from this resident was for the parking committee to revisit segways, if that was an opportunity to save time in order to get to different areas in the downtown. We were at one time a test site for Segway for parking enforcement, and it was brought as an option.
That could be an option. Of course, you have the seasonal issues associated with that, and the hills. That would
There's
be
some challenges,
that would
but
be interesting. Yeah.
For the parking committee to take up.
Sure.
May I note that I'm no longer on the parking committee, but thank you for.
There now.
Council Todd.
Counselor Todd,
Council Pierce.
we'll get the recording.
That's what
Thanks.
I
Sorry.
Thank you. In going through the pro forma and the numbers here, I did not see a line item for uncollected fine balance.
Mhm.
Is it in there and I missed it, or,
No, it's not in there.
so can you speak to what the level is,
In terms of
uncollected
uncollected,
fines?
I could have Mr. Walsh, you have it? Or Mr. LeBrun?
I do paper and computer tonight. So, right now, our collection rate, I'll start there. Our collection rate for the number of tickets paid versus the tickets that are owed to us. Our collection rate for fiscal '22 through the end of April is 82%. Our collection rate in fiscal '21 was 89%. Our collection rate in 2020 was 84%. Our collection rate in fiscal '19 was also 84%. Our goal is to do 85%. So we're collecting, those are the collection ratios, the number of tickets written versus the number of tickets paid. The outstanding balance for 4 years of tickets owed to us, because they increased dramatically because of penalties and other charges, is $593,000. In the current fiscal year, it's about $145,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chamberlain?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just for clarification to Councilor Fennessy's point, is it my understanding, am I correct in understanding that the ARPA funds were intended by the federal government largely to fill the holes in municipal budgets caused by COVID?
That's correct.
Right. And am I correct that the parking fund took a significant hit during the COVID years, in part because there was very little activity downtown, nobody was parking except to run into some restaurant, pick up some takeout food and leave?
I'd say the parking fund and the arena, yes, were the two hardest hit.
Follow up here. So essentially, even though that hole is being filled by the ARPA fund, it's really replacing what we normally would have received.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Council Fennessy.
Thank you. Following up on Councilor Pierce's question, would you believe that I've had a parking ticket outstanding for, I think, almost 2 years now, and I've yet to receive a communication from the city about it? Is that consistent with our general practice?
I'd have to ask Mr. Florence to actually speak to our general practice, but we do have a protocol in place where we notify folks. I think we triage based on the number of tickets that that are owed to us by individual. But one of the PCRs that's in the budget is to try and streamline that process by being able to tie in directly into the DMV motor vehicle database, which will make it more efficient for us to do lookups, because right now everything is manual, so it's a very onerous process. When we're writing. Right now, we're writing about 15,000 tickets a year, but pre-COVID, we were writing about 22,000 tickets a year, so.
Speaking from experience, no, they send letters, and they send emails, and pay your ticket, will you?
So at this point, it's been an ongoing experiment to see how long it takes to get a letter.
Yeah, me too.
Coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
I was on the parking committee when I first got it, and I mentioned it, and I still haven't seen a letter.
So how much is the fines on a 2-year
Yeah.
ticket? Oh, it's gonna start growing.
I'm sure it's very
Compounding
significant.
interest, please.
These kids aren't going to college anymore. Okay.
But
Anyone
the
else?
fund is going to be balanced.
Yeah.
ARPA Fennessy. Anyone else? Council 9.
I guess that kind of leads to a question, what do we do with uncollected debt? Do we use the services of a collection agency? Or what steps are we taking to collect on those types of debts? My recollection from the short period of time I worked in the parking area, a lot of those tickets come from people who live outside the city and who don't necessarily have a motivation to pay those tickets.
So we do go through a process where we do letter writing, except to Councilor Fennessy. And, we have an ordinance, so there's a couple of things, just to reiterate. So we have an ordinance, Code of Ordinances 1941-4. We're allowed to issue a summons and take them to court. However, district court here in Concord does not like their time spent on that, so they've generally have dissuaded us from doing that. Case law in New Hampshire prohibits us from actually going to small claims court. It's Portsmouth versus Carisis, 126, New Hampshire, 717, 1985. So we can't go to small claims court. License plate recognition technology is commonly used in most jurisdictions across the country. However, the legislature here in New Hampshire has deemed it an invasion of privacy, so therefore they've outlawed the use of license plate recognition technology for us to go down and actually scan people who owe us and be able to take appropriate action. That's RSA 261-75B. So the Dodd-Frank Act that was passed during the collapse, the financial collapse in 2008, 2009, trying to deal with that, has actually made it so delinquent parking tickets don't show up on credit reports. So there's very little motivation there for somebody to get involved, and the idea of farming it out to a collection agency makes it very hard because the hammer is relatively limited. The only option that we really have, if the council wanted to get very aggressive about it, would be to adopt RSA 231:130-A, which is withholding motor vehicle registrations for those with delinquent tickets. There are municipalities in New Hampshire that do that. Roughly a third of all unpaid tickets are from Concord residents. The rest of them are from other folks, so it wouldn't get everything. And we'd be able to partner with Manchester, Nashville, Laconia, Keene, Dover, Hudson, and Plymouth, and likely others if we were going to do that, because there's reciprocal agreements that can be put in place, that they would withhold the Hudson's residence ticket, and we would withhold the Hudson residence motor vehicle registration until we were paid, vice versa. Yeah.
What's the downside of implementing a program like that?
Well, I imagine it's not going to be terribly popular, but it's really the mechanism that the legislature in New Hampshire has provided, given all other mechanisms I mentioned are not as viable as we'd like them to be, or not viable at all.
All right, thank you. I will,
Councilor Credit, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
You want her to go first since I already
Either
have?
one, either one.
Mr. Walsh, are we still being aggressive going after rental agencies for people that have a rental car and they avoid the ticket?
We do deal with rental agencies a lot, where somebody gets a ticket and then sticks it with a rental agency. We don't write tickets to drivers. We write tickets to vehicles, to a license plate. So we do interact with those folks fairly often, especially now that we have a hotel in downtown.
Anecdotally, I did rent a car recently, and on it, it said that if you get a parking ticket after you return this car and we find out, we will still charge you.
They've got your credit card.
Thank you. Yeah, they got you.
Plus an extra $25.
Oh, so you read all of the fine print.
No, I got tagged.
You and Fennessy, got it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the RSA, you might have said it while you were explaining the RSA. Is there a minimum amount or a maximum amount? Like, it's like another $5 fine, you wouldn't hold someone's registration? Or is that up to the municipality to set boundaries?
I think there might be some ability to, on the, I can't quote
Yeah.
the RSA chapter and verse because I don't have it in front of me. My sense is there might be some flexibility on how it's implemented. But the point is that the legislation exists, the statute exists if we wanted to go that direction.
Councilman,
Thank you. What was the RSA again, please?
The RSA for withholding motor vehicles registrations is RSA 231:130-A.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
any further questions around parking? Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, so let's move to airport.
Okay, go to the airport fund. You want to be on item number 6. And you'll want to be on page 143. For fiscal year '22, projected revenues are ahead of budget by $42,000, and that is mainly due to the ARPA fund received in the amount of $31,000. Expenses are on target with budget. Fiscal year '23, revenues budget to budget are up $24,000 or 6.6% due to increase in fuel markup and contractual increases in rental income. Expenses budget to budget are up $7,000 or 1.4%, mainly due to fringe benefit transfers. Supply increase due to increased chemical costs, and debt service is down $8,000. And if you go to the pro forma for the airport, if you go to the bottom of the page, we'll go through the same exercise we did with the last one. The bottom of the page, the projected net under fiscal year '22 budget column shows a budgeted loss of $112,000. The fiscal year '22 estimate column, the projected net is a loss of $71,000 and will reduce the ending working capital to $311,000. So you still have plenty of money in the working capital item. The projected net for fiscal year '23 column is a loss of $95,000, which will further reduce the ending working capital if it comes true at the end of fiscal year '23 to $217,000. As we make our way across pro forma columns, the ending working capital is projected to be a negative $179,000 in fiscal year '26. So anticipate that unless significant new revenue sources is developed the next couple of years, the general fund will have to start providing support to the airport fund in '25 or '26. And to go back a little bit in history, up until about 2005, if I remember correctly, the general fund would typically provide revenue. I think it probably amount about $150,000 a year to the airport to keep it solvent. So, and then when we did the deal with the guard and other properties, then additional revenue came in to help offset those costs. Glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions regarding airport? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to conservation.
Next item is item number 7 on your agenda. Again, this is all on online at home if people want to follow along. The budget starts on page 146. This fund is designed to account for the revenues of leased properties in the acquisition and management of conservation properties. The revenues in this fund are relatively stable year to year, and you'll see that while the budget for use of fund balance, we do not actually make a formal revenue entry for this each year. Expenses budget to budget are down $7,600 or 7.4%, mainly due to reduction in the transfer outline. This is a transfer to the general fund to pay off debt service costs for conservation property purchases. And each year, we use the fund balance from the prior fiscal year to transfer out to the general fund for this purpose. There is no pro forma, as you all know, for this fund. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions, anyone? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to golf.
That will be item number 8, Golf Fund.
I'm sorry, could I take a buy on that?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Mr. City Manager, how much of the city's land mass is, square acreage rather, is in conservation?
In conservation, so let me clarify the question. I think there's
You
approximately.
have people behind you ready to go.
Yeah. You have-
Okay,
you have
if
staff
they're
who
all,
are-
if they're all lined up, have them come on up.
As we used to say when I ran high hurdles, they're in the chocks, they're ready to go.
Okay. Come in.
Good evening. So we looked at, I think there's a number, 7,500 acres or so in the, it's under conservation with the city. That doesn't account necessarily for everything that's under conservation. The state may have properties, things like that. And I think that calculates out to about 18% of the total land mass of the city, I believe.
20, I think
Follow
it's
up, Your Honor?
22.
How does that compare to other municipalities? I mean, is that high, low, mid-range?
Quite high.
Quite high.
I think when we did the calculation, when you really put together all the public and the private things, because so much of the property is owned by the Forest Society or the Audubon or somebody else, when you put them all together, it's quite high,
So
actually.
when we throw them in, are we like up around 20, 25%?
I did a calculation, then this was many years ago, and so a lot has occurred since then. It was about 22%, so you're probably closer to 25% now.
Okay, great. So a lot of land in conservation. Thank you.
And it varies. Some have different types of easements, and some
Yeah.
is actually owned outright, but some of it actually is protected. You know, say the farms and things like that. I think Hardy Hill Orchard to Rossview.
The bottom line is a lot of green space in
There
Concord.
is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, fellas.
Kudos to the Conservation Commission, by the way.
You do a great job.
Okay, golf.
Golf, you want to be, that's item number 8. And you want to be on page 149. The golf course continues to be very busy and certainly a treasured asset of the city. The course conditions are good, or better today than they've ever been. The tree project has made significant improvements, letting airflow and much more freely, and allows sunlight to be absorbed into areas of the course that have previously been blanketed by shade. With only a few months since the major tree work that was done, tee box and fairway conditions are already showing gains. Cleanup of remnant undergrowth and debris continues. New sod has been placed in key areas, grass, new trees and shrubs have been planted, and new cart paths are being configured. Due to the excellent course conditions and the efforts by the Director of Operations and staff and memberships are expected to near 400 players this year. Daily fee play continues to be very strong, and there are more outings and high numbers than ever before. And the number of leagues that play each week continues to grow. This is just the golf portion of the business. Beaver Meadow is also very busy. Winter for golf simulators, activities, ice skating, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. Each year Beaver Meadow is also a polling place for the elections. As you look at page 149, for fiscal year 22, revenues in the fiscal year 22 projected column are anticipated to be $306,000 better than budget. Revenues are projected to be up in most categories. Projected expenses are anticipated to be slightly below for fiscal year 22 revised budget. Supplies category is anticipated to come in over budget due to the cost of sales, which has a direct relationship to revenue. So we obviously have to buy the product to be able to sell the product and make a profit. Up $29,000. For fiscal year 23, revenues budget to budget are up $246,000, or 20.4%. Expenses budget to budget are up $252,000, or 20.9%. This includes a return to transferring overhead charges to the general fund in the amount of $111,000, and you'll see that when we get to the pro forma. Also included in this budget are temp staff wage increases totaling $28,000, increased supplies for loam, sand, tea, and green accessories, and fertilizer for $12,000, full year funding for the assistant golf pro, $42,000, and tree maintenance for $5,000. The City Council also approved a $2,000 in funds in May for the New Hampshire Professional Golf Association REACH program that will sponsor Beaver Meadow Pathways to Golf to introduce the game of golf to citizens in the community who may not otherwise have the opportunity to participate in this game. This is projected to be a 3-year partnership with the New Hampshire Professional Golf Association. Is based on the successes, will likely be a program the city can sponsor locally in future years. That's what we'd like to be able to do if the finances support it going forward. While I've not spoken much about the capital projects during the operating budget presentations, I do want to discuss conditions of the clubhouse, the parking lot, and the walkways. The structure and the surrounding walkways, as well as the parking lot, are in decay and need considerable work. The design funding, which I proposed in the capital budget, as recommended by both the ad hoc committee and the golf course advisory committee, will move Beaver Meadow forward to its destination facility for all seasons. The last item you want to look at is the golf pro forma. And on the pro forma, let's go right to the projected net at the bottom of the page. Under the fiscal year 22 budget column, the projected net is a gain of $7,000. You can see that in the $6,959 in the column to your left. The fiscal year 22 estimated column is a gain of $282,000, or $275,000 better than budget, and produces an ending working capital of $537,000. For fiscal year 23 budget, the projected net gain is $1,600 and an ending working capital of $538,000. As we follow the ending working capital through the fiscal year 28, the ending capital is positive through 26, and then moves into the negative in 27 and 28. This is one of the other ones I had mentioned. We tend to be conservative in the revenue estimates going forward in this fund. We also review the revenue changes in greater detail every year. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Those questions. Councilor Craven.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilor Brown.
Mr. City Manager, when it comes to the pro forma, and when we're looking at our ending working capital, and we're also trying to balance the needs of the community, the $1 million that we have in the capital fund that we would be putting in general obligation funds, after we close out our year, at any time, the city council could say, hey, can you take some of the money out of the capital reserve here, the ending working capital, the capital reserve, and put that towards the bond payment to cover the golf course, so there is nothing that is actually funded by the taxpayers. Is that true? Much like the conservation moves money.
The city council has full control over all the working capital dollars. This is really the accounting process of what you go through things. So you could always take dollars from one place and move them to another if you chose to do that at any time during the year.
Great. Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, earlier when we began this budget hearing process, you had said that we've invested $1.4 million in irrigation for the golf course. And according to the CIP, we're looking at spending an additional $1.4 million irrigation alone on the golf course. Is that something that can be paused? We're looking at, purchasing a new ambulance, a fully staffed ambulance. Gas prices are $5 a gallon. I'm hearing from a lot of constituents that are really upset about our spending. They're watching their budget very carefully, so they're looking at this budget very carefully.
Yes, you can pause. These are, that's why we broke them up into phases. You can pause it at any time. The concern I was concerned originally about phasing it out because recognizing the fact that instead of doing it all at once and because what happens is each year there's pieces that go, and if you figure part of the piping goes, and that destroys that part of the course, so to speak, there's costs associated with putting that all back together again. So you're trying to balance do you be proactive about it as best you can, and I can't even say we're being proactive. It's something we probably should have done a decade or 20 years ago. And so do you take the chance and not do it, skip it, and then recognize the fact you could lose, an area or something like that,
Right.
or do you try to phase it out? I try to call it down the middle and phase it out, and instead of, but you can stop and go at any time. You could double up if you had the money, or you could take a year off if you want to.
Thank you. Follow up, Your Honor?
Please.
As a property owner, I'm facing renovations all the time. And in tough times, sometimes we can only do a little bit at a time. And I know in last year's budget, the golf course design and construction was scheduled for 2028 and 2029. Is that something that we can push back out to those years?
You could. The concern that I had, the reason I have them where I have them, is because we had looked 2 or 3 years ago at doing some window work the plumbing, a lot of pieces. And as we get further into looking at what need to be done, it got to be more expensive. It's like when I had some kitchen work done in my house. It turns out they had to come in and do the wiring that was originally done when they built the house. They didn't do it right, so they had to come in and do a lot of rewiring.
Right.
So the price went up. So that's what we found when we started looking at the golf course. And then we said, okay, I came back to council and said, it's not going to be this amount of money. It's going to be much more. Do you want to invest this? Do you want to put money into this? And knowing that if you put the money into it, you're not going to want to lose the value of that money in 3 years and go back and do something else. So I think you need to do things in the next couple of years. And if you don't, you can have, it's just going to be worse. So
Just with the
just like
building,
your house.
with
Just like your house.
the supply shortage.
Yep.
You know, it just seems like we would be constructing at the height of the market, and maybe if we pause a little bit, that could be helpful. Follow up, Your Honor?
Please.
So I know that Beaver Meadow is great for fundraising, and a lot of nonprofits use it. Have there been any fundraising for the golf course, specifically to raise money for the clubhouse, for golf carts? You know, I know there was a Bags and Bites for the playground, and the Greenway Trail is fundraising. Has there been fundraising by golfers for the golf course?
I think there's been a lot of donations have been made. People will donate trees, people will donate benches and different things like that. I think the golf course has taken, at least the time that I've been here, the golf course has taken the approach of being the mechanism for other people to raise money. Because it's like I remember when we were trying to work with a group to raise money for the skate house, is that you can only have so many groups out there raising money at a time before, and they're always going to the same major donors, and you can only have so many people out there at any one time doing it. So the golf course, we never got to the point where for city facilities, we've actually gone out and done things, maybe for a walkway or something like that, but not for
Is it something,
major renovations.
but we could do, like we're, fundraising for an ADA compliant playground at White Park. Is it something that we could look at doing?
You could. What we found is that most people don't want to write a check to the city. They'd rather write it to a nonprofit organization or something that's much easily tax deductible. Versus, because they say, hey, well, I already pay my taxes.
Right.
I don't need to give money to the garage to fix the elevator in the garage,
Right.
Something like that. They'd rather give it to a cause, So.
Well, the
But you could.
clubhouse,
You could. Or the clubhouse.
they could sponsor the windows, or the tiles in the kitchen or something like that.
There's no reason not.
Great. I just have a couple more, if you don't mind, sorry. Do we know the percentage of residents who are Seasons Pass holders?
I don't, but
No.
others might.
Okay, I just,
I don't know
I'd
if
asked
we've
it
ever
late.
tracked it
Okay.
by,
It is 29,000 rounds. That doesn't mean percentage of
do we,
membership, but.
when people come to play, do they tell you where they're from?
So if you're looking at whether it's members or just people that come and play, we gather some information from them, but we don't gather addresses.
just the Seasons Pass holders?
Yep, and we don't gather addresses from the Seasons Pass holders,
Okay.
just email addresses.
Okay.
So we don't know if there's 90% from the city of Concord or 89% or 88%. I can't tell you that number. We don't have that specific statistic.
If we decided to increase rate, I'm sorry, Your Honor, may I continue? If we decided to increase rates for non-residents, is that something that we would be able to track to identify?
We would have to at that point if the decision was made to increase rates for non-residents, yes.
I have one last question, and this is just for residents. I know during golf season, I experienced it myself. Wandering out on the course can be dangerous. So thank you for that, and I appreciate Phil driving me around. Thank you. That was a long time, and I could appreciate the amount of work and money that goes into the golf course. It's a lot of both. So for a resident during golf season, that is 169 acres of beautiful manicured space. When can they use it?
Well, certainly we don't want people just wandering out on the golf course during the golf to the day
Right.
when people are playing golf. It's dangerous.
Right,
And
right.
especially if you're not a golfer and you don't know,
Where
you
to
could get
go,
hit by a
right.
golf ball and, one, we would feel terrible, but two, we don't want to have that liability either. So we don't want you to do it.
Right.
Folks can come to the golf course, they can go out to the patio, they could have lunch, they could just sit there and enjoy the scenery. They could go on the putting green, they could putt, they could
Pardon? Driving range?
They could go to the driving range. You do have to pay for the driving range, though. I just want to make sure you know that. So the
$3.
next
I don't
time you,
go- I don't golf,
next
sorry.
time you go play at the driving range, Tom, you got to make sure you pay. So, there are some things that folks can do during the summer or during the golf season, but I can't say strongly enough that do not go walk
Right.
on the course when
Right.
people are playing golf. It's
What-
dangerous.
So if somebody wanted to go walking in the morning, what's a good time if they wanted to go walking?
Well, you're going to have to, if you were to do that, again, we don't really condone folks just going out on the golf course during this season. You're going to contend with sprinklers. You're going to contend with all the folks that are out there mowing the fairways, mowing the tees, mowing the greens. The folks are out there working. It's, people start working at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. We can't stop people from walking out in the middle of the night in the dark. I wouldn't suggest that either. But, during the golf season, I would suggest, to go out on the course itself, do it as a player or something.
And that's
Just-
rain or shine, you would recommend that?
That's what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
You're
Your Honor.
That's
So
great.
would you believe that in the morning, people go to the Murano Trail to watch people play the 14th and the 13th hole? It is adjacent to that. It is our city trail. It's a public trail. It's noticed. People use it for snowshoeing in the winter. And then during the summer and the months when we are playing golf, that is where people are enjoying the golf course and watching the players play. It's actually pretty cool. And I would never recommend someone walking around at night because the bears are using that as a means to get over to Bog Road. Would you believe?
I hadn't thought about the Bears, but thank you.
Thank you. True statement.
I just know they don't let me walk
Council
out.
Pierce.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, we as councilors, on behalf of the city taxpayers, allocate operating dollars and often capital to many venues of services that our citizens prefer and some demand, such as hiking trails, parks, libraries, the arena, skate parks, pools, etc. And of course, the golf course, which is the only entity of all those that covers its costs from an operating expense.
Of all those? The, completely? I don't know. Any, I mean, the water wastewater funds completely cover their costs.
Yeah, but no, I'm
Well,
talking about leisure, of all the things that people,
No, if you, I mean, if you really stopped and thought about what things cost you, parks and the arena and the golf course, I mean, if you really went down to it, you'd start saying, okay, what are the values of these things? Do they pay property taxes? Do you treat them like private entities? I've talked about this with, the water supply. You have a lake. Do we charge taxes on the lake? No, we don't charge taxes on the lake. Or the value of the pipes that go through the ground or the buildings themselves. No, none of them really do. They're all part of the same. The taxpayers pay.
so the golf course does not, a follow-up, so the golf course does not cover expenses on operating?
It's on most years, yes, but I couldn't say say every single year. But in most years, yes. Same thing with the airport, and same thing with but it didn't at one time. The arena didn't the other year, and I mean when it came time to do the locker rooms at the arena, we said if we want to do locker rooms, the general fund's going to have to step in and pay for it, or we're not going to have locker rooms. So the general fund stepped in and paid for it, paid for those bonds for 20 years, I believe, and then it's off. The next major improvements to the arena or the golf course or anything like that are going to be on the general fund. If you want a parking lot at the arena that's got to be functional, the general fund's going to pay for it. The arena users will never be able to afford to pay for a parking lot.
A quick follow-up, you mentioned bond payments. What's the effect on taxpayers of a $4 million capital program funded by general bonds? What does that mean per year?
So the first year payment on $1 million, let's just use that as an example. It would be over 20 years. it would be $50,000 for the principal portion, and at 4%, it would be $40,000 for the interest. So that would be $90,000. And then each year, the principal would remain the same, but the interest would decline each year for the 20 years. So you can just take that number and multiply it times, at $2 million, it'd be, $180,000, and $3 million would be $270,000. So you could just go from there as the first year payment, and then as the years go on, the payment decreases because the interest decreases.
And just quickly on the debt, if I remember from the first night, the debt payment is typically about 15% of our budget. Is that correct?
It's about 11 to 12%.
11, okay. And it's down this year?
It was down 147,000 in FY '23.
It was down last year, too.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess as kind of a comment preceding a question, I've scrutinized the arena and golf course budgets for a long time. And I've always recognized, and I've made peace with many of the investments that were put in from the general fund as these are city assets and we need to maintain the assets in order for them to maintain their value. That being said, preceding the question, it may be helpful to some of you can talk about what the transfers out cover and whether or not there's a rate increase built into the pro forma to address some of those increased bonded debt costs.
Sure. So there's in the general fund, in the golf fund, along with most of the other special revenue and enterprise funds, there's a transfer to the general fund to cover overhead costs. So those overhead costs range everything from legal services, administrative services, Tom, myself, payroll, accounts payable, all of those things that we house internally. And we do a calculation with all of the funds and the general fund to try to determine what the prorated cost for that overhead transfer would be. That's how we come up with that number. In the case of the golf course, $111,000.
So as way of explanation, that's money that leaves the golf course special revenue fund flowing over to the general fund. So it's a deficit against the pro forma in the golf course. That's increased revenue for the general fund.
Exactly, an expense to the golf course or any other fund, and revenue to the general fund to help offset tax rates.
So there we have a positive attribute of the golf course in many ways supporting the city for costs and expenses that directly relate to the servicing of the golf course. As we get into increased bonded debt related to some of the capital projects that we have coming forward, is there a plan within the current pro forma, whether it be through a rate increase or any other sort of revenue mechanism, to cover all or a portion of the increased debt cost?
So we've talked, at least internally, a little bit, and about how do we do this to try to minimize what that debt cost would be, right? So thinking about if we have a new clubhouse, if we have new parking lots, all that, does that translate into some increases in membership fees, and does that increases in rates for daily play? And so those things would all be taken a look at and taken into consideration to try to support additional revenue. And then, certainly as we go through the budget process, we could take a look at and say, all right, how much additional funds could be transferred to the general fund to help offset some of those debt service costs based on what's going on. Obviously, the golf business goes like this, right? So we have some good years, we have some not so good years. So we would have that same kind of thing. But I think Councilor Kretovic made the comment that, this would be probably similar to what we do in the conservation fund, where we look at, a year past and look at what that fund balance is, and then come up with a certain level to retain within the fund, and then maybe transfer the remainder over back to the general fund to help with those, offsetting debt service costs. Hey, if we could, get to a point where we were bringing in enough revenue that it would pay the entirety of those debt service costs, all the better, and that would be a terrific thing. But it's certainly taking a look at this asset as a city asset and, making it work all the way around certainly is the important thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. LeBrun, part of the reason that, is it true? Part of the reason that we're looking at the redesign of the golf course is because we have opportunities for diversified funding at the golf course that we've never had previously. When the New Hampshire Golf Association reached out to us with the potential to rent space from our new clubhouse, that is an entirely new revenue source to the golf course. have no idea how much square footage they want. We have a general letter that says, hey, we're thinking 3 offices, 2 bathrooms, a conference room, and a little kitchen. It's an office building, an office space that they're looking for that rents at pretty high rates in some of the areas of the city. So are we not, in the purpose of this, just the design, looking at other potential revenue resources that can come into the golf course as well as the city as a whole?
Yeah, certainly, with the related to the New Hampshire Golf Association, if they were to rent space from the city, over a long term, and certainly the city's interest would be, make sure that that's to the extent of the debt service payment, that we would have an agreement for at least that period of time, as well as maybe some share to, the expenses, or however we work it out within a lease agreement. And certainly that is revenue that would come in that we weren't anticipating. Obviously, you would have the additional cost for the space, associated with that, so we'd want to certainly maybe, recover that, and then a little bit more. But, it would certainly be a very big benefit to the golf course to have the New Hampshire Golf Association, and they, are very helpful in bringing other events or bringing different things to Beaver Meadow, one for exposure and hopefully for additional business. So it just ups the prestige of the golf course that much more.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councilor Brown?
Oh, I was just going to go back to different things that we might be able to put a pause on. When I did my tour with Phil, we saw the results of the tree removal from the winter. And I know that Ted Clamarsa, no, it was Ted, not Ron.
It is Ted.
It's Ted Kenziora. Had said, yes, it's supposed to look like a construction zone or a war zone because that's good for the grass. I know that we're slated to spend $50,000 to remove trees and then spend another $5,000 on tree training. We're spending less than $5,000 to plant trees. Could we maybe just plant trees this year and do the additional tree removal at a later date when it doesn't look so much like a construction? Maybe golfers are used to that. I don't know. There's sand pits everywhere. But is that something that could be pushed out? Is it critical?
I would say it's critical in the sense that the tree project is designed to help improve the conditions of the golf course. So there are certain areas of the golf course that, and it took me a long time to think about this, as the sun is coming up, even during the winter time and melting the snow on the course, and the longer it takes for the snow and ice to get off the course, those areas of the fairway tend to be the toughest areas around for the golfers to play in. So the more you can remove some of that tree, get some of that sunlight on there, even during the winter time, but especially during the growing season, then you get that grass growth and you get a healthier turf, and you get a healthier fairway and greens and tee boxes for golfers to play on. So that's the intent of doing everything that's being done. Can you take a pause? The city council can decide at any time to take a pause. So that really becomes a policy decision of the council. If you want to take a pause this year or next year or the year after, you can do that for anything. That's the council's decision. Our job is to make sure that we make the best proposals that we possibly can for the benefit of whichever area that we're looking at, whether it's the golf course, the airport, the arena. We try to do the best that we can, and it's up to the council to make a decision on, is this a pause, or is this worth going forward, in order to maintain the overall health of this, which is what was originally intended for.
Thank you.
Councilor Rice Hawkins, you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was trying to find it in my notes. Could you just clarify with the golf club house, is the idea with the, and obviously this is contingent on approval and leases and all of that, but is the idea that the association would pay for the building and construction of the space that they would ultimately use, or that the city would pay for it and they would lease it, and then we'd have to decide how to use that space or upkeep it going forward?
Are you talking about New Hampshire Golf Association?
Yes, please.
All right, so we're in discussions with them as they see this process going forward, with the city council as well. They've, expressed a sincere interest in having some space at the golf course. But the city would own the facility, the city would own the building and work out a lease arrangement with them, much like we do with the restaurant that's, leased at Beaver Meadow. So they don't own the building, they don't own, the main equipment in the kitchen. That's something that the city owns, but it's all part of the lease agreement that we have with them. And we would work out this probably a similar arrangement with them. It would be kind of hard to say, okay, you own this toilet and we own that toilet. You can't really, it's hard to do that when you have a shared building like that. So we would own it and we would work out a lease arrangement with them.
Follow-up. Was there any plan to build a conference space or a meeting space like that prior to that conversation?
I think we, this is the design money is really intended to take a look at the overall facility. What can we incorporate in that facility? How can we continue to move that facility forward to a very well-received year-round facility? We want to have make sure that the correct amount of space is in there for, a restaurant. We want to make sure the correct amount of space is in there for voting because, every year, at least once a year, there is voting that occurs at Beaver Meadow. We want to make sure that we have, the proper office spaces, the proper spaces for a golf simulator, the proper spaces, there's very strong interest from the skiing community to have some space dedicated to them. So there's a whole host of things that, we would take a look at, whether the New Hampshire Golf Association comes to Beaver Meadow through an agreement or not. If they don't, certainly the building would probably be smaller. But if they do, then, certainly we would ramp up the building size a little bit, but they would, they would pay the offsetting costs in order to do that through a lease agreement.
Thanks, Your Honor. Thanks for all this testimony. It's appreciated. Going back to some of the testimony we heard Thursday about the golf course and broadening the discussion, isn't it true that while we would like to turn a profit, we would like to be able to return money to the general fund, we would like not to draw on the general fund for some of these facilities such as the golf course, the arena in terms of recreation, the airport, the Greenway Trail, that all of these are investments that we make as a city in order to make Concord more attractive to businesses, more attractive to workers, more attractive to families, more attractive basically as a place to live, to work, and to recreate. Is that true or not?
That's correct. I think the difficulty that you have as a council and the advisory committees have as advisory committees is you're trying to achieve the balance of how much to charge for the use of these resources when you could, I would think at the golf course and the arena, you could charge more. But do you want to price out certain groups and certain individuals? And no, you don't. I mean, the purpose is to try to provide as many different, I think, avenues, whether it's the trail network or the swimming pools or whatever, something for every library, something for everybody, and that's what the golf course and the arena are. And you try to keep the profit down, so to speak, so that the people can actually use it. And you could you charge more for the Concord Youth Hockey to play at the? Yeah, I'm sure you could, but you try to be competitive, but you also say try to keep the cost down for the parents and the people who use it. So it's always going back and forth with that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councilor Hawkins.
I was just going to email this question, but since we're talking about it, do you know where I could find in our past council minutes the breakdown of how much we charge versus other area golf courses?
It's posted on the website too.
Yeah.
I didn't see it offhand.
So there's two different times probably. Usually in the July, August timeframe, we do the new membership rates. So if you look at the last year's July, August, you would see the membership rates for the current year that we're in for golf season. And then if you look at the February, March council agenda, you should see the daily fee rates that the city council approved for this golf season also. So there's two different times that we do it.
Follow-up. And that'll have the comparison for the other area, how we compare to other area golf courses?
Yeah, I believe that I included that report. If it's not in there, I could certainly provide it to the city council.
Thank you.
I think it's in the minutes of the committee. It's looked at.
Yeah, it's you have to go through every minute to find it.
Anyone else? So Council Pierce made me think of this. Is this a fair summary? So there are certain, because I think this is a really healthy discussion, and but it reminds me kind of a bigger picture as we go through this budget process. There are the services that we must provide because we are required by state statute to do so. So, for instance, we have to have a collections office. We have to have a clerk's office because we have to manage elections. Nobody says how many people within those offices, and that's where we determine the level of service that we want to give. So if we want to have one person in collections, we can have a long line outside. We can have 10 people in collections and have shorter lines. That's our choice, but that is the service we have to provide. Then there are those services that we provide, but we don't have to. We could contract those out. So we could take at General Services and take all of the vehicle repair, and we could farm all that out to a private repair shop. We could take the ambulatory service and we could privatize that and get out and be like Manchester and Nashua. We could privatize that. There's probably several services. We already privatized trash. We could come up with some other stuff. And then there are services that we provide that we don't have to provide at all, right? So there's all the leisure services, or at least that's the way it's listed here, and in terms of you do not need there's nothing requiring us to have a library. There's nothing that requires us to have a Parks and Recreation Department, to offer any programming services whatsoever, to fund any parks whatsoever, any pools whatsoever. There's nothing that requires us to have an airport. That is the choice we make. There's nothing that requires us to have a golf course, an arena. There's nothing that requires us to buy any conservation land whatsoever. It was interesting how much we actually have. I mean, we have to allow somebody to put it in current use if they meet the statute, but we as a city, as taxpayers, we don't have to buy any current property whatsoever. So I appreciate your question because there's a lot of kind of the ones you have to, the ones we do because we think it's the right thing to do, and down the order. So I think it's a great discussion we're having. That's what I'm saying.
The budget in these types of items, it's a picture of your values. It's what you value as a community and what you want for the community. It's as simple as that. It changes over time and you put priorities in certain things, but to me, when you come to a community that, a lot of communities would love to have an airport, a lot of communities would love to have a golf course, would love to have 7 swimming pools. They would fight. They would love to have a hospital. They would fight for these types of things, and you have them. So the question is, do you take care of them or not?
Okay, any further questions?
Your Honor and Mr. City Manager, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate you pointing that out, that these are services, that we're affording, and this is like a moral document. There was a letter to the editor that really hit me in the gut. It was love to golf, love to ski, pay for it yourself. A well-run city should have libraries, good roads, and just, I really want to go into this budget work session focusing on the things that are important to us in our community. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing that, let's move on to next one, which I believe is the arena.
So the next item is the arena. That's item number 9. And on item number 9, you want to be on page 153 of the Arena Fund tab. The arena finances are significantly better than in fiscal year 21. I'm taking you back to 21 here. As you can see, looking at where we were with the $504,000 in revenue and the $629,000 in expenses. For fiscal year 22, under the projected column, although concession sales are down $6,000, rental income is up $20,000 over budget and $135,000 better than fiscal year 21. The Arena Fund also received an allocation of ARPA funds in the amount of $180,000. Overall, the revenues for the fund are better by $216,000. For fiscal year 22, projected expenses are projected to be under budget by $11,000. For fiscal year 23, revenues budget to budget are up $43,000 or 6.4% due to rental income and advertising. Expenses budget to budget are up $40,000 or 5.6% due to increased wages, outside services, supplies, utilities, and debt service. Transfer out of general fund is up $3,000. So I've included in this budget, and you can see these in the back. Temporary labor wage adjustments, up $7,000. A return for professional development and training, $2,000. Increase in credit card processing fees, $3,000. Increase in cost for building supplies, $2,000. Restroom partition replacements, $3,000. Increase in repairs for maintenance and cost, $2,000. Increase in refrigeration services, $10,000. Refrigerators, $4,000. And then you want to go to the pro forma for the arena. And under the pro forma, the budget projected net for fiscal year '22, as you can see down the bottom, is $26,158. In the next column, the estimated projected net is for '22 is a gain of $201,000 and will result in an ending working capital of $276,000. For fiscal year '23, the projected net is a loss of $23,000 and will result in an ending working capital of $254,000. As we move forward through the fiscal years, the ending working capital remains positive through fiscal year '26, with a negative ending working capital starting in '27. Again, we try to be conservative on the revenue projections in the out years, though it's safe to say that the arena fund, along with the airport fund and the golf fund, will need support from the general fund for any major capital projects that are undertaken. I commend Jeff Bardwell and the arena staff who continue to do a great job with the operation, especially under the circumstances we have seen over the past couple of years. They're always looking for ways to say positive solutions to issues and new opportunities to bolster this fund. So if you really look at the arena fund, you're going to see over the next few years $2.5 million in general fund obligation costs for the parking project, the lobby, and building repairs. But if you look at the greater general area, the whole property itself, there's another $2 million in there for if we want to do something with a skateboard park, if we want to do parking for the park itself. We want to also look at doing some event square and a pavilion. Merrimack River Greenway Trail section is down there, and also working with Concord Crew. So if you put those together, that's about $4.5 million worth of general fund obligations to make that a really usable, a really much better usable property. And don't think that for a moment that we don't get calls on a regular basis about, hey, the city want to sell this property, because what a fantastic development opportunity for somebody at that site on the highway interchange to do something like that. But the council has always said, nope, this is a community asset. We made through Councilor Bouchard's efforts, we made improvements, as you remember, to the boat launch ramp down there, and after decades of being really unusable, and now it's really a great facility. So a lot more to come, but
Who has questions on the arena? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We'll move on to
solid waste.
solid waste.
My favorite.
Solid waste and Adam Clark. That's what this is. So that's item number 10, solid waste fund. You want to be on page 157. So for the fiscal year '22 projected column, revenues are projected to be up $318,000, in large part due to receiving $386,000 in ARPA funds and other revenues. Commercial disposal sales are short of budget by $139,000. However, expenses are projected to be down $152,000, mainly due to lower outside service costs and lower commercial disposal sales. For fiscal year '23, revenues budget to budget are up $137,000, or 3.1%. Expenses budget to budget are up $194,000, or 4.2%. I've also included in this budget increased costs for recycling bins. So those recycling bins that people have out in front of the house, we're pretty much running out of them, so we have to order some more. So $2,000 for that. And the increased cost for pay-as-you-throw bags of $22,000. Now you want to go to the pro forma. Pro forma, the projected net line at the bottom of the page shows budgeted loss of $174,000 in fiscal year '22. So that's the $173,744. The fiscal year '22 estimate is a gain of $297,000, which is $471,000 better than budgeted, resulting in an ending working capital of $2.4 million. The FY '23 projected net is a loss of $231,000 and results in an ending working capital of $2.2 million. As we move through the years looking ahead, at the ending working capital for fiscal year '28, so go to the bottom on the right-hand side, the ending working capital is $681,000, or $153,000 ahead of the target, if I got that right. Yes. As a reminder to the council, the first 10-year period of the contract with the Casella expires fiscal year '24. It's right around the corner. Remember saying it
That
was
was
right.
one of my
It's been right around the
questions.
corner, it's been right around the corner for like 6 years for me. And we'll be negotiating a contract extension or a new contract and expect increased costs at that time, especially with what is occurring in the recycling and solid waste environment today. As you can see in the revenue section of the pro forma in fiscal year '25, there was an adjustment in the flow control line that reduces revenue as well as corresponding line in expenses. Also projected in the pro forma revenue section is a 25% increase in the purple bag prices in fiscal year '24. Again, we look at that every single year and see if we need to do it. And another 10% increase in fiscal year '27. On the expense side, the city is projecting additional costs for the new contract for pay-as-you-throw, collection, and recycling. I think it's easy for me to say, you probably have the best waste contract in the entire state of New Hampshire right now, and you're taking advantage of that and have for the last 8 years, and the party's going to be over pretty soon. So all of the revenue and expenses adjustments are included as part of the fiscal year '28 ending working capital projection. I do expect there'll be significant discussion by the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and the City Council on how to fund the increased costs for this. Overall, the fund is in solid shape. Staff at General Services do an excellent job managing the operation and projecting changes. They'll be needed in future years. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Could you please go back to the 25-cent increase? That was on, you expect that because of a new contract, or is that just natural, the cost of the bags went up?
Yes.
Okay, it was a two-part
Yeah,
question.
there's 2 parts, yes, yeah.
Is there both yes?
I think it's, well, you're going to want to have your ending working capital in a good position when the time comes for these increase in costs. I mean, right now, what we pay for recycling and what we're gonna be paying for recycling are 2 different worlds. And, it's.
But do we expect, follow-up please,
Any
do we
increase?
expect that increase in cost? Let me just put it this
Due
way.
to the bag costs themselves?
Not only the bag costs, but is the economic, will it change the economics of the pay-as-you-throw program with a higher cost of the contract? Meaning, if we're spending more on recycling, do we need to continue with the pay-as-you-throw program?
Yeah, so if you go to, and maybe Adam could come up and help me with this. If you look at the pro forma.
Right.
Okay, look under the expense side.
Mhm.
And you'll see.
Contract adjustments?
Estimated recycling contract adjustments for collections and recycling. You can see building into the 25-year budget, we're making, and actually for the pay-as-you-throw above, there's 3 lines in there that we're now including as our best guess about what these things could cost. And that's what's driving these estimates and the need for increases as you go forward. If this contract never ended, you wouldn't need any of that, but the end is near.
Yeah, Adam, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, he's exactly right on that. It's not so much the price of the bags, it's really like you were saying, the whole economics of the recycling and trash collection program.
And I'm sure, just a quick follow-up, someone moves into town, I get an email that says, what the heck is this purple bag program? We go through the part of explaining it, and I think people understand it pretty well. The number one complaint is the quality of the bags. It just, we put our stuff in there, the bag rips out. And what are we doing about that?
So we go out to bid next year for the bags again. The issue that we tend to have most commonly is the drawstring. So I have pay-as-you-throw. I live in Barrington, and we have pay-as-you-throw bags down there. Same manufacturer, everything. We never have problems with the bags. So it's really the drawstring seems to be the issue. So hopefully with the new bid, I've seen an increase in quality lately. This year I probably had maybe 12 complaints that came through the office. I do see it on social media sometimes because we monitor that. But I have seen an increase in quality lately.
So could the city get their bags where Barrington gets theirs?
It's the same company.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Council Keach?
thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is it fair to say, or is it cynical for me to say, that the bags are designed that way on purpose?
Well, that's true,
minimize
too.
the amount of trash in there?
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. There is, in theory, a weight limit to the bag, so it's 30 pounds and
Because I
15
do
pounds.
see an awful lot of people taking a traditional green bag and just sleeving the purple over it to
Absolutely.
play by the rules.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty heavy bags out there.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Apologize.
I think this is, I don't know who this is for, but I apologize if I missed it. What's the estimated flow control adjustment?
So in the city, we have what's called the flow control ordinance, and we direct the haulers that operate within the city to go to our disposal destination. And so we work with 7 or 8 haulers within the city, and we say, okay, you're going to use our disposal destination. And so when we go out to bid, the thinking is, are we going to continue with a flow, and this is what we work on at SWAC, are we going to continue representing that additional tonnage given the sort of the economic reality of that industry right now? And so that's still to be decided, but that's looking like the direction that we're going to be going, if that helps.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Adam.
Yep.
Thank you.
Why don't we move to water?
Okay, that is item number 11. And you want to go to the water fund, and you'll want to start at page 162. And on page 162, revenues in the fiscal year 22 projected column are down $104,000. Water usage is down by $114,000. We had a very wet summer last year, you'll remember, which impacted water sales for irrigation. Investment income is down by $73,000, as there wasn't much of an interest rate last year. And the water fund received $63,000 in ARPA distribution for revenue. Expenses in the fiscal year 22 budget column are down $85,000, mainly due to wages being down $75,000. For fiscal year 23, revenues budget to budget are up $141,000 or 2.2%, a reflection of the 4.5% rate increase that will go into effect in September if you approve it. We'll see that when you get the pro forma. Expenses budget to budget are up $126,000 or 1.8%, and are due to wage and benefit increases, outside services and supplies. I've also included additional program change requests in this budget. There's 4 of them. $15,000 for utility billing tablets for the staff. $40,000 for chemical increase at the Hutchins plant, so chemical costs, of course, have gone up. $8,000 for increased costs for professional services and supplies, and $16,000 increase in utility billing printing costs. Now you want to go to the pro forma. And under the pro forma, you want to go to projected net budgeted for fiscal year 22, again, the bottom left-hand side. We had budgeted a loss of $494,000 on purpose because the fund was quite healthy. The projected net estimated loss for fiscal year 22 is $513,000 or $19,000 lower than budget. For fiscal year 23, we're projecting a loss of $480,000, and that is factored into the 4.5% increase. For fiscal year, again, this is your decision not to hold too much money if you had enough money in the fund to actually purposely budget for that loss. With fiscal year 23 budgeted results, the ending working capital is $2.9 million. If you follow the ending working capital line out to fiscal year 28, the bottom right-hand side, you'll note that the plan increases each year. The ending working capital for fiscal year 28 is $2.2 million, is on track with a targeted working capital of $2.12 million. So again, you're trying to hit that number. As you may recall, when presenting the fiscal year 22 budget last year, I projected a 4.5% water rate increase for this year. That is what I'm recommending again for this year, 4.5% increase, so right what we talked about last year for fiscal year 23, and that increase translates to, for the average customer, $12.48 annually, or $1.04 per month. The last attachment that you have in your file is the water rate comparison. The water rate comparison for other communities, and in both the blue and orange bars for Concord leave us the third lowest rate compared to these communities. And for the newer councils, these are the communities that the city council has selected for us to compare ourselves to over the years. And we're quite low compared to these other communities. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Council Champlin and Councilor Credwick.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is not a very incisive question. On page 162 of the Water Fund, what is the revenue item that is described as retiree health insurance?
So there are dollars that are budgeted for retirees who are on our health insurance program. They pay, there should be a revenue, as you can see, the $39,040 that come in from folks who, once you leave the employee of the city, you can stay on the health insurance program, but you have to pay your share to do that. This is the revenue coming in for that.
All right. And these are specifically people who worked in the...
Right. That occurs in all areas of the city, but because this is a separate fund, we call it out as a separate line item in this fund. You'll also see the same thing in wastewater.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilor Credwick.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, $16,000 in printing supplies. I mean, certainly understand that paper and all supplies are increasing. Our new accounting software, are we going to have the ability to go to electronic billing for people so that we can save on the postage and supplies and everything else?
All things billing. All things billing is Brian.
So that's one of the things that we're taking a look at, just to see, if we could go to a complete electronic billing format. Obviously, there's a lot of customers that probably wouldn't like that. We do have an electronic... Self-selected. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at as we move forward and continue on with this billing process.
Thank you.
Councilor Nye.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manager, my recollection from our general fund discussion is that we were projecting investment income to increase based upon the interest rate environment. In this budget, we're projecting investment income to decrease. Maybe you can speak to that.
So these are the kind of things that I don't like to admit to, but last year when we budgeted investment income, I want to say we budgeted $78,000 or something like that, and we probably should have budgeted $780. I think we just didn't budget correctly in that line last year. That's why it looks like a significant decrease. We didn't budget very high in these funds for investment income, but we expect it to be higher than what we've actually been collecting. But in this fund and in the wastewater fund, you'll see the same thing, and that is my mistake for budgeting too much money. I guess I was a little overzealous.
Thank you.
A lot. Too optimistic.
Too optimistic. That's me.
Thank you. This is a much larger question. How are we doing from a supply standpoint? I know we're looking at additional housing and development in the city. How are we doing? Are we going to be able to meet that supply or meet that demand? I'm sorry.
Let me bring up Mr. Water. All things water. Here he is.
Your in-house water geek, yes, that's me.
Turn them loose, go ahead.
Great, good question. So one of the things that we do is we do a lot of projecting looking forward on water supply. So we have 10 million gallons per day available, okay? So just consider, I won't bore you with the science on that. We look at peak flows, right? When we hit a peak of 10 million, we got to be looking for water elsewhere. So we've pretty much gone ahead and tied it to population. So when population rises, we basically designated that when Concord gets to 50,000 residents, that's when we're looking for an additional supply. So that puts us typically, what we're looking at forecasting now, 2035 to 2040 is when we're going to be looking for additional supply. 2035 to look for where it is, 2040 to basically get it built. Now, there's some other factors in there if I can keep going on. So say Coors Brewing comes in, that throws that whole projection out of there, but we obviously follow that through permitting, and we know what's coming in for demand.
Guinness, by the way.
Or Guinness, right, or Guinness, yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that, just for confirmation, that all of the different housing projects that we have in flux right now, you're looking at that in advance of anything being built?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Chaplin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I seem to recall.
So irrigation, goes up. So we do a lot of education, in saying, hey, just be wise when you irrigate. Do it at night so you're not dealing with the evaporation, that kind of stuff, so you're not spending the money or using all of the resource. But one of the things that's happened is industry-wide, so that's nationally, right? You can't go to Home Depot and get a 5-gallon flush toilet anymore, or you can't get a 7-gallon per minute flush shower head anymore. So we actually track how much consumption is used per person per capita, right? So I do a lot of that, again, the water geek stuff, and typically we average about 72 to 74 gallons per person per day. So, and we'll do that calculation, when the population is coming in. So when we get a new facility or a new condominium project, that's kind of what we throw into that. And that's actually a higher national average. Everybody's heading towards 65, so there's this drive to 65. Massachusetts, it's a regulation. But in New Hampshire, the water's cheap, so, it tends to get used more. So it's actually happening. So that number is actually going down on its own, so the irrigation kind of still goes out, but you're seeing it in residential use. So now it's floating around 70 to 72.
Great.
2021 COVID year was actually around 76, 78. So.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
If I could just add to that, one of the things that the city council has done over the years, and it's really paid off now, is that you made very large investments in your distribution system. So where there's a lot of exfiltration, so to speak, in many pipes, in water pipes all around the state, the country, and everything else, Concord has a very, very tight system. So well done that, as a matter of fact, I think we were able to push off the idea of having to do a water plant by about 10 years. Mm-hmm. You could be facing this in new water plant extensions into the Merrimack River in 2030, but because a lot of those moves that were made, that has pushed it to where Marco was saying, to 2040. So again, kudos for the investments.
I was just, you mentioned something that I was going to mention during the irrigation discussion. We were talking about the golf course, but one of the additional benefits of the irrigation improvements is we had a great deal of leakage. It was the correct word at the golf course because of the old pipes. We were losing a lot of product in the old leaky system.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Thank you. My last question. So when we looked at our emergency services, we see that we provide a lot of services Monday through Friday when there's a lot of people that don't live in the city who come in and are working here. Do you track water usage in the same way?
So no. So what happens is for us, so we push water out to the community, right? So we don't know we know where it goes through reading the meters, right? So we measure, as the city manager said, we monitor our ratio. In other words, I know how much I push out the door at the water plant, and then I read all the meters, and then I compare one to the other, and we get what's called a metered ratio. So I know 90% of our water is what's called accounted for. I know where it goes. The other 10% is lost. National average is actually 85, so we're 5% better. Concord is very unique. So if you look at peak flows and things, we're a community of 42,000, but daytime usage, we're a community closer to 90 to 95,000 because we have a lot of people that come in and actually work. So our water system is very dynamic. So daytime, usage is much different than nighttime usage, but that's what, the technology and the equipment is for, what the city council has approved to allow us to do that, very flexible.
And the system is built so that the water, particularly Station 4 that you're working on, is pushing the water out to the towers at night. So when you get up in the morning and turn on your shower, you're getting the pressure there. And because it's not being used at night, we can fill up those towers. And of course, we have the Marge Swope Tower, water tower repair program that she started years ago. So.
House Pierce. Quick question. 1 CCF of water, that's 7,500 gallons?
748 gallons.
750, okay.
Yep.
I moved the decimal point, thanks.
Any further questions? Water? Okay. I'll just point out that Council Grace Sexton's drinking city water.
It's the
Thank you very
perfect
much.
amount of non-taste.
That water's supposed to have no taste.
That's right.
Right from the
It's
tap.
good water.
Okay,
Yep.
so with that, I'm going to call a 1-minute recess. Mayor Pro Tem's going to take over the meeting at this point. You have the wastewater to go, and then the public hearing. I'll just remind you all 2 things. One is, if you have questions for the last night, please fill out those yellow sheets, and that way we can get it to the appropriate folks to get the responses back, and then we can all see the responses for Thursday night, so we're all prepared. That was number 1. Number 2 is we are starting at 5:30, and we're starting as the Finance Committee. We will shift into the City Council mode as a regular meeting, just FYI, and then we'll have the public hearing of the budget, et cetera. So with that, thank you for all being here, and we wish Councilor Todd's mom a fast recovery. So with that, we'll take a 1-minute recess, and Mayor Pro Tem will
recess. I'm Candace Bouchard, Counselor Ward 9, Mayor Pro Tem. The mayor had to step out. So, City Manager, we're on wastewater.
Your Honor, yes, we are on wastewater. You want to be on tab number 12, wastewater fund, and you'll want to be on page 166. So on page 166, revenues in the projected column are expected to be $643,000 better than budget. Sewer use, and I'll go through why all of those items, why that much. Sewer usage and fixed charges are $360,000 better than budget. Sewage usage charge to other towns that we charge other towns is up $145,000 better than budget. Septic processing fees that come into the plant are up $100,000 better than budget. Sludge disposal is $80,000 better than budget. Investment income, as Brian had mentioned earlier, is $102,000 worse than budget, so that interest income did not materialize. The premium holiday from Primex, the share that goes to the wastewater fund, is up $24,000, and the share of debt service from the state that was unexpected in the year, because they had cut the program and then reinstated it, is $33,000 better than budget. So generally, in most years, 3 or 4 of these will work in your favor, and 3 or 4 of these will work against you, and you end up with a much closer number than what we have. But again, we'll take the $643,000 better than budget. Expenses in the fiscal year 22 column are expected to be $52,000 better than budget, mainly due to savings in wages. So you had a whole lot of extra income and actually reduced expenses. For fiscal year 23, revenues budget to budget are up $1.3 million, or 15.6%, due to the sewer usage and fixed charges up $967,000. Sewer usage from the towns, other towns, is up $145,000. That is reflecting the numbers that were in the fiscal year 22, so we're projecting those forward. Septic is increased $50,000, and the share of debt service increased $259,000. Last year, the state reduced the state grant payments, reversed themselves, and are now committed to making those payments. So that translates to $259,000 for the city. Expenses, budget to budget, are up $514,000, or 5.9%, mainly due to wage and benefit increases, outside services increase, supplies, and really debt service. We've also included several program change requests in the budget. $28,000 increased cost for department supplies, chemicals, and repairs. $5,800 increase in capital outlay. $10,000 for spill prevention control measure plant update. We're required to do that. $7,500 to replace a chemical feed pump. $5,000 for a chlorine analyzer, so this is replacing equipment that we need. $5,500 to replace the sealer that's required for the laboratory analysis of E. coli, and that's at the end of its life, so that needs to be replaced. $7,500 for intermediate actuator. $5,000 for biodegradable lubricant, so we want to go to a better type of lubricant that actually gets used at the plant. $10,000 for a touchscreen replacement for the control systems. $12,000 for a pump station grinder. I won't explain what that is. $15,500 for utility billing printing increases that we had talked about for water. We need to do additional toxicity testing for $3,500 and $5,500 for PFAS and nutrient testing. So anytime the EPA requires additional testing for effluent, we actually put those programs in place, but there's obviously costs associated with that. If you go to the pro forma, this item, the first column, the projected net budget loss for fiscal year 22, again, you are budgeting for a loss because of the fund's health, was $317,000. The second column, projected net estimate gain, is $378,000, or $696,000 better than budget. For fiscal year 23, I'm budgeting a gain of $491,000, and this would result in an ending working capital of $5.6 million. If you follow the ending working capital to the fiscal year 28, the ending working capital with the projected increases is $2.9 million, or $50,000 more than the targeted working capital. Again, we're budgeting a 2.5% rate increase in the wastewater fund, I mentioned earlier. Last year at this time, our projection was that would have to be a 5.5% increase, but because the fund is doing so well, we're recommending a 3% less than what we thought we'd be. The impact of the 2.5% wastewater increase on the average property owner, the homeowner, is $11.52 per year, or 96 cents per month. And the last attachment that you see is a sewer rate comparison for tonight. The city's sewer rate is the fourth lowest of the comparison communities. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for the city manager? Seeing none, thank you. That's it?
That's it.
That's it. Any comments from the public? I'd like to open up the public hearing at this time. Mr. Schweiker? Welcome.
Well, you understand that by batching all the public hearings at the end and letting the city manager talk for an hour and a half, now you get to listen to me talk for an hour and a half straight, and the mayor is very clever to have avoided all that. Anyway, there's, I guess, 3.5 of these I want to talk about. Because we've just been into water, I'll start with that. The water rates are very peculiar in that people at the low end like me pay far more in this availability fee than we pay for the water. The water essentially is underpriced, which is why so much of it is sold, because you're paying that availability fee whether you use it or not, and then the water is real cheap. And I took an online class last fall at MIT about energy economics. They have a similar problem with electric power. You know, they're trying to hit you with these giant fees whether you use it or not, and then sell the electricity cheap. And the problem with that is that people overuse water because per gallon is cheap, and at the low end people are paying too much for it because they have to pay whether they use it or not. I know when they first came out with this business about we're the third lowest in water rates, that was based on the biggest customers in the city pay the third lowest water rates, whereas because of that high fixed fee, the people at the low end are the third highest water rates in the state. So, you know, once again, you're letting the wrong people get the good deal, I think. You know, and what they discovered with electric power is they considered electric power was sort of a necessity, and I think you could say the same thing about water. So in fact, you should not soak the poor people, you should soak the bigger users. And a lot of countries have what they call tiered rates in electric power, that your first so many kilowatts are at one price, and then if you use more, you pay a higher price for the next tier, and so forth. And we could do the same thing with water, that the water we're pumping out of the Contoocook River in effect costs more than the water we get out of the lake, because first you got to pump it up there, and then you got to treat it more. So that's more expensive. We could do the same thing in Concord. We should say, okay, at the low end, people are using water out of the reservoir, so they pay a lower rate for the water. But then the people at the higher end, if we have to pump water from the Contoocook to satisfy your needs, you know, after your first 100 gallons or whatever it is, you'd pay a higher rate for it. And we could also reduce the fixed fee. And once again, they have some issues with that in other places. That, as you may or may not imagine, lower income people pay a higher portion of their income for electricity and presumably water than people at the higher end of the scale. So they were doing things like basing the fee based on the census tract you live in. If you live in a low-income census tract, you'd pay a lower fixed fee than if you lived in a higher-income census tract. Once again, to try and price the water, closer to the amount people are actually spending on it. And I know we used to have something from the general fund about this, but the city has what I consider a peculiar policy. They want to make the city tax rate look low, but they don't really care if the school tax rate goes up. They don't really care if the fees for water and sewer and trash go up. They just want to look at the city tax rate, and if that's a mistake. Another way you could tend to, spread the water cost out better is you could charge the fire department for the water they use. I mean, that's an expense. And if you charge them for the water they used, that would go into the, general fund tax rate, but it would reduce the water rate, which is what you're talking about. Let's, make the water rate closer to the actual cost of the water you use. And the advantage of that would be that your property taxes are deductible on your federal income tax, whereas your water bill isn't. So, once again, that would be an advantage to the ordinary people, but it would be worse for the, large users who are the people that, tend to control the city. And as far as the sewer rates go, everyone is probably well aware that the sewer rates are far higher than the water rates. And once again, if you're a big user, you can get a special meter. And so if you say that we're using so much of our water for irrigation or whatever, and it's not for running back in the sewer, you only have to pay the water rate on the water you buy. You don't have to pay the sewer rate. But if you're just an ordinary person, you can't get one of those special meters. They're too expensive. So in effect, you're having to pay the sewer rate, which is higher than the water rate, for all the water you're putting on your lawn that isn't going in the sewer. And various, once again, other communities have got a system for dealing with that, whereby in the summer, you only pay a sewer rate based on the amount of sewer you use in the winter, assuming the excess is all going on your lawn. But, once again, that's, bad for the big users who, are trying to find ways to stick it on the lower end users. Okay, enough for water and sewer. We'll go to parking. I mean, I actually support the extra parking officers, and the reason is we keep being promised that they will do something with the neighborhoods, and then they never do. They take all their people and use them as meter maids downtown, and they never seem to get out to the neighborhoods. And one particular issue is cars that are parked over long. That one thing an officer will not do is, determine if a vehicle is parked there for 3 hours. They only want to make one visit, and if it's parked too close to a driveway, they can deal with it. But how do they know how long it's been there? To know how long it's been there, you've got to make multiple visits, and that's something, the police officer can't figure he's going to be able to come back in 3 hours and check it. So this is something that you've got to have the parking officers do, and they got to do it out in the neighborhoods. And one particular issue with that is, it may or may not remember, but it is illegal to park in the same space for more than 2 days. And there's a lot of people do that on the weekends. They have these monster pickup trucks they use for their business. They bring them home, they park them on the street because it's too big for their driveway, and just sits there on the street all weekend. But the police can't do anything about it because, that's a time thing. They don't do it. So if you could have the parking officers go around Friday evening and locate some of these vehicles that are on the street, and then come around again, midnight Monday, and see that vehicle still there, you could, number one, get some revenue, but number two, get them off the street. I mean, I see that as a zoning issue. If you had a business and you were parking big vehicles on the street in front of your business all day, they'd probably say that's not acceptable. You've got to have parking spaces in your business for your vehicles. But so for 8 hours a day, you need to park them on your lot. Well, you can park them every night on the street for 16 hours. You can park them all weekend for 2.5 days, and nobody will enforce that. I mean, I personally think that you shouldn't be allowed to park a, commercial vehicle on the street at all overnight. That's for convenience of residents, it's not for businesses, but no one else seems to go along with that. So anyway, that's the first half of parking. The second half of parking is, for those of you who have been around long enough, all of the parking studies and consultants and everything said the real problem in this city is not parking overall, it's parking on Main Street. And the way to deal with this is parking on Main Street should cost more than elsewhere. And all of this, went through all the committees, all the hearings, everything perfectly up till the last minute. And then somebody from downtown said, oh, we don't want to pay more. So they didn't do it. Parking on Main Street's the same price as other places in the city out in the neighborhoods. And that's just utterly ridiculous. And they first justified it, well, we have that downtown construction project, so we don't want to hurt the businesses now. And then, oh, we've got COVID, we can't hurt the businesses now. Well, I think it's getting about time that we did what we were supposed to do. I think it was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, Mr. Champlin, when we were supposed to have that $1.50 on Main Street? And we should do it now. We should, let the places where the parking is the scarcest start putting the money in. Because, once again, this is a out-of-town thing. Somebody said that half of the parking revenue comes from people that don't live in Concord. And Concord, as you may or may not know, is the second poorest town in the county. Only Salisbury has a lower average income. And so we have these people from Bow and Hopkinton coming and parking downtown, and we're making Concord residents subsidize parking for these people from out of town who are probably wealthier. And once again, the administration does a good job of hiding this. We're using property tax money to subsidize downtown parking, and they launder it through the TIF district. But once again, those who've been here long enough remember that TIF district was supposed to expire, so we could return all that money to the general fund. But the administration keeps using it for, goodies for the downtown businesses, and one of them is subsidizing the parking, taking money from the TIF district to put toward the garages and stuff. So we need to quit that. We need to close out the TIF district like we were supposed to, and we need to raise the downtown parking rates like we were supposed to 6 years ago. And that's the way to make the parking fund solvent and not taxing everybody in the city for parking somebody out of town is using. Oh, and then the last thing, and I wasn't even going to talk on this, but you folks had such a good discussion of it that I decided I have to join in. Anyone going to guess what that is?
Golf.
You're right. Okay. I think that the idea that you don't charge out-of-town people more to play golf is outrageous. I mean, let's look at some of the other things in the city. The out-of-town people have to pay for a library card. They have to pay for swimming pools. I had a friend that they were having a book discussion at the senior center, and I said, what would it cost my out-of-town friend to come to a book discussion in the senior center? $50. That's what it costs to get a senior pass in Concord, and you can't get one for one event. You've got to buy one for the whole year. So if my friend wanted to go to the book discussion, it would cost $50. But we cannot charge 50 cents more to play golf in the city. That's utterly ridiculous. What I'd like to see is let's figure out, if we were to take all the city subsidies of the golf course, what a membership would cost if you spread it among the users. And then we'll say, okay, well, if you need to subsidize golf, we'll do it for residents. But there's no reason that we need to subsidize golf for people from Bow. I understand that last meeting here you had some good fun. You had people from Bow get up and say, gee, what a good idea it is to have that golf course here. Maybe we should give it to the town of Bow, let them pay those capital things for the new clubhouse. But it's ridiculous to have, Concord residents who are among the poorest in the county paying so people can play golf from out of town. And we've had the Chamber of Commerce people saying, oh, well, it improves the image of the city and attracts businesses. Well, maybe it does, but maybe we should let, somebody interested in playing golf pay for the golf and not the, poorer residents in the city. And, once again, some of the things you subsidize, there are things that, you can't expect people to pay for. And the pools, for instance, I would say the people that use them tend to be lower income because people with more money may have their own pools. Whereas the golf course, I would say just the opposite. The people that use that tend to be at the higher income strata, and most of them can afford it. And maybe we could do like we have with the rec program. Some of them have a subsidy for poorer people, but we don't need to subsidize golf for everybody in the city, and more particularly, we don't need to subsidize it for people from out of town. And the last thing is you're talking about $50,000 to cut down trees. I mean, I understand it's expensive to cut a tree, in the build-up area because there's houses and power lines and stuff. How come you can't get somebody to come cut them for free? They're out on the golf course. What are you going to hit if it falls the wrong direction? So let's look into why are we paying $50,000 for something you get some guy with a skidder to come in and haul them away for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Any questions for Mr. Schweiker? Councilor Kredovic?
Thank you. I just wanted to note that the golf course does do premium pricing. So if you wanted to go out and golf on a Saturday morning, you are going to pay more. So premium pricing is absolutely something the city is looking at across the board. Thanks.
Okay, but not for people from out of town. Why are we using our tax dollars to subsidize not only our neighbors, but people from Bow and Hopkinton who are wealthier? And I only looked at one comparison golf course. I believe that I discovered that if you add for a single person to be a member of Concord Country Club, you pay a annual membership fee, and you pay an assessment every month, which adds up to more. You've got to buy a minimum amount at the clubhouse and the
restaurant.
diner. It's like $5,000 a year just for that. But then if I wanted to join, I would then have to buy a $3,000 membership and a $3,000 bond. And compare that to what it costs for a year at Beaver Meadow. I think that there's quite a bit of difference there, and maybe Beaver Meadow could raise their rates without being quite at the same level as the Concord Country Club.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on the budget? Yes. I thought.
You weren't worried about Mr. Schweiker?
Good afternoon, City Council. Thank you very much for having me. I've got a couple of different letters that I'm pulling from because there's a lot of us at Beaver Meadow Golf Course that feel very strongly about this, but not everybody could attend.
Excuse me, if you could just announce your name.
I mean, that's important too.
It
My
is.
goodness.
We
I'm
got it
Tanya
for the
Rochette.
minutes.
I'm a resident of the city of Concord for just over 19 years, so I'm still kind of a newbie in the city. But I do find that Beaver Meadow is one of those places that allows people to come and join, congregate, meet other people, but it's also not seen with a lot of barriers to participation. We have the young children's program, young kids program, the golf programs that run every year, and with that cost also comes, or at least it has in the past, with a junior membership for the whole year that they're open. And it has been quite affordable for those families that otherwise would not necessarily have access to learning how to play golf. But I'd like to read the letter that my husband wrote. He's just got here. Come here, babe. Is it okay if he joins me?
Of course. We're going to ask him his name too.
Sorry I'm late, everybody.
If you would just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Robert Rochette.
Thank you.
And he's also a Concord resident. Why don't you read your words in here first?
Okay. 18 years ago, we moved our young family to Concord, New Hampshire because it was the perfect place to raise a family. My wife and I, especially attracted to the community activities like Concord Youth Sports, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and especially Beaver Meadow Municipal Golf Course. I grew up playing with my grandfather and other old men wearing funny plaid pants. I loved the game, but not the atmosphere. I eventually got back into the game because of the popularity of Tiger Woods. The sport of golf was breaking down traditional barriers, and programs were emerging for everybody that wanted to play. No better example of inclusion than Beaver Meadow. The Beav is for the working man or working family that enjoys the game. Sorry, I gotta catch my breath. I ran here. Phil Davis has created a special community throughout the years that should be celebrated. On any typical day, the Beav could host a high school golf match, youth golf clinic, and a men's or women's golf league night.
Or co-ed golf league.
Or co-ed. The growth of youth golf at Beaver Meadow is remarkable. The course provides safe after-school environment for young people to get exercise and socialize. It provides an excellent social atmosphere after a hard day's work as well. Just like any other public course, we pay to play outdoor, indoor golf, or to use the driving range. As taxpayers, we're happy to support our public swimming pools, the other recreational facilities, even if we don't use them. We understand that these are important to the community of Concord, just like our golf course. Beaver Meadow is open to the entire community, which is what makes this such a special place. Unfortunately, through the years, the clubhouse and the parking lot have been falling apart a bit, and we need your support to rebuild. The clubhouse not only serves as a pro shop, but also an amazing restaurant and function hall. This is an important reinvestment of the community of Concord. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to add a little bit more, there's a lot of organizations that run the golf tournaments throughout the year and find it as a great way to, make money for their nonprofits, but also to engage a lot of people in a course that they may not be aware of because it's not a fancy Concord Country Club or things like that. It's a municipal course, but it is probably one of the best municipal courses I've ever seen or played on. But I would not encourage walking during the day, especially when people like me are playing, because it could be a little bit dangerous for those if they're not paying attention. But I've really enjoyed the events that I've gone to. City of, I just hit the facilities and the support that gives us the opportunity to participate in these is run by the staff. They are very comfortable in navigating all the different aspects of what golf tournaments need in order to, pull off a successful event. And the tent that's set up outdoors, I believe, is a city property tent that the rental income for that goes to the city. And I see that being used with every golf tournament that's happening. So that's an additional income that's not calibrated into the support and performance and efforts of those that work at the Beaver Meadow Golf Course. But it's also something that is used throughout the year, not the outside tent, but the inside. For the simulators in golf, they have leagues that go throughout the year. Children and families use it for birthday parties, things like that. But it's a facility that gets use all year long. And the condition of the bathrooms and the facilities in general are starting to fall apart. And I do know that it's been something discussed for a number of years, but it's always not been the top priority. But with the opportunity of New Hampshire Golf Association looking to rent some facilities in there, will also bring a lot more visibility to the course and to what the course can provide as far as outdoor space for events, but also inside with a lot of the high-tech abilities that they've already brought in for the simulators. We do find families that are using the hockey rinks outside or the hockey skating area. It's not just for hockey, but also the cross-country trails during the winter when the golf course cannot be used. And we see a lot of schools that hold their practices there. We see schools that hold their races there. And we see families and kids coming inside to warm up, get some hot cocoa, use the facilities, which cause even further disrepair issues throughout the years. But it is something that removes a lot of the barriers to entry for those in the community that would like to learn the sport, become engaged with physical activity, with the outdoor use in the parks and the areas that they're able to walk and ski throughout the winter. But that's really all I have to say about that, other than my kids have both greatly benefited from their opportunity to participate in the golf programs prior to high school, during high school, and now and beyond. So I really do hope that you understand what a vital part this is for our community and the historic value of Beaver Meadow Golf Course. And if you haven't seen the video about its history, it's something you need to watch. So that is all I have, and I thank you very much for listening. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Councilor Brown.
Hi, thank you for your testimony. So you're very passionate, excited. It sounds like you really enjoy golf, and I will not go out walking when you're playing. But so would you consider participating in a fundraiser event for the golf course?
I would, absolutely. And I think membership rates, it's something that, of course, I'd love to keep membership rates low, but I'd rather see the rates go up than us not be able to have this available to the city.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to come up and speak? No? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I did skip over agenda item number 14. My apologies to the council, and it's any other or new business. Anybody? We have none, so seeing that. And so I just wanted to give a reminder that we are meeting again on Thursday, June 9th. And then we'll start off at 5:30 with a committee work session, a financial committee work session on the budget. And then we'll move into council mode and have public hearings, and we'll vote on the budget on June 9th, Thursday, starting 5:30. Be here, please. So, anything else, City Manager?
Nothing to add, Your Honor.
So with that, I know not to ask Councilor Nyan, but Anybody like to make a motion?
I
Counselor
move that we
Pierce.
adjourn.
Okay, moved by Counselor Pierce, seconded by Counselor Kedovich. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
These meetings, there's so much.